I thought I had the perfect marriage for 5 years until one business trip changed everything. Natalie and I had built what I believed was an unshakable foundation of love and trust. My half-brother Ryan and I had a complicated relationship growing up, but I never imagined he could betray me so completely. When I came home early from Seattle that night, I discovered something that shattered my world twice over. First, when I caught them together, and again when my entire family somehow decided I was the villain for not forgiving them. Before I share how my world fell apart, and how I stood my ground despite everyone turning against me, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about choosing self-respect over toxic family loyalty. My life before everything fell apart was what most would consider successful. At 34, I had established myself as a respected construction project manager for one of Chicago's premier development firms. I specialized in commercial high-rises, and the job paid well enough that Natalie and I could afford our 3-bedroom home in a quiet suburban neighborhood with good schools. We had been planning to start trying for our first child this year. Natalie and I met during our junior year at University of Illinois. She was studying marketing while I was in engineering, and we connected during a mutual friend's birthday party. There was an instant chemistry between us, and after dating for 4 years, we had a beautiful wedding ceremony at our parents' lakeside property. For 5 years, our marriage seemed rock solid. We rarely argued beyond the usual minor disagreements, and I genuinely believed we communicated well. Natalie worked as a marketing coordinator for a local retail chain, and we balanced our careers while still making time for regular date nights and weekend getaways. My family situation had always been somewhat complicated. My parents divorced when I was 8 years old, primarily due to my father's infidelity. Within a year, he had remarried his affair partner, Sandra, who already had a son from her previous marriage. That son was Ryan, my half-brother, who is 4 years older than me. Growing up, we lived primarily with my mom, but spent every other weekend at my father's new home. From the beginning, there was a competitive dynamic between Ryan and me. He seemed to resent sharing his mother's attention and my father's resources. As we got older, Ryan would constantly try to one-up me in sports academics, and later in our professional achievements. Despite this underlying tension, we maintained what appeared to be a close relationship. We would grab beers, occasionally attend family functions together, and even helped each other move when needed. I always tried to be the bigger person, letting small jabs and competitive comments slide for the sake of family peace. Our father, Gerald, insisted on monthly family dinners at his and Sandra's suburban mansion. These gatherings typically included me and Natalie, Ryan, and his wife Jessica, and occasionally my father's siblings and their families. During these dinners, Ryan would invariably steer the conversation toward his real estate business, highlighting his latest big sale or new luxury listing. I never felt the need to compete, but I noticed how my father would beam with pride at Ryan's accomplishments while giving my career achievements only passing acknowledgement. Natalie had always gotten along well with my family, particularly with Ryan and Jessica. The 4 of us occasionally went on double dates or weekend trips together. Looking back, there were probably signs I missed. The private jokes between Ryan and Natalie, the way they sometimes disappeared simultaneously during family gatherings, the increasingly frequent text messages Natalie would get that she would smile at but not share. At the time, I trusted her completely, never giving these moments a second thought. The business trip to Seattle was supposed to last 4 days. I was there to oversee the final details of a potential partnership with a West Coast development firm. On the 3rd day, the client unexpectedly canceled our meetings due to an internal issue on their end. Rather than stay the extra night as planned, I decided to catch a late flight home to surprise Natalie. I landed at Chicago O'Hare around 11 p.m. and drove straight home, tired from travel, but looking forward to seeing my wife. As I pulled onto our street around midnight, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked about a block away from our house. Something about it seemed vaguely familiar, but I was too tired to place it immediately. When I pulled into our driveway, I noticed that lights were on upstairs, which was unusual since Natalie typically went to bed early on work nights. I entered quietly, not wanting to startle her if she had fallen asleep with the lights on while reading or watching television in bed. The house was eerily quiet as I set down my luggage and briefcase in the foyer. Then I heard it. Muffled voices coming from our bedroom upstairs. My heart started racing as I slowly climbed the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The bedroom door was partially closed, and as I got closer, I could clearly distinguish two voices. One was definitely Natalie's. The other was unmistakably male. I pushed open the door, and the image that confronted me is forever burned into my memory. Natalie and Ryan in our bed. My wife and my half-brother. For a moment time seemed to stand still, as they scrambled to cover themselves, their faces shifting from pleasure to shock to fear in seconds. "Fred, you are not supposed to be home until tomorrow," Natalie gasped, clutching the sheet to her chest. Ryan just stared, his mouth opening and closing without forming words. Finally, he managed to say, "This is not what it looks like." The absurdity of that statement might have made me laugh under different circumstances. Instead, I felt oddly calm, like I was observing the scene from outside my body. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Please tell me exactly what this is," then I said, my voice unnervingly steady. They both started talking at once, a jumble of excuses and apologies. It was a mistake. It just happened. They never meant to hurt me. They had been drinking. It was the first time. I simply stood there recording their pathetic attempts at explanation until Ryan finally fell silent and Natalie began to cry. Without a word, I turned and walked out, ignoring their calls to come back and talk. I got in my car and drove to the nearest hotel, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. That night, in the hotel room, I did not sleep at all. My phone buzzed continuously with texts and calls from both Natalie and Ryan. I did not respond to any of them. Instead, I sat in the dark, replaying the scene over and over in my mind, feeling waves of nausea and rage washing over me. By morning, I had made only one decision. There would be no forgiveness, no reconciliation, no second chances. The next morning, I contacted Sandra Thompson, a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague who had gone through a similar situation. She agreed to see me immediately, and by noon I was sitting in her office describing what had happened. Sandra was professional but sympathetic, advising me to document everything and avoid direct contact with Natalie, except through legal channels. "Given the circumstances, we should be able to enforce the infidelity clause in your prenuptial agreement," she explained. "That would significantly limit what Natalie can claim from your assets. But we need to be methodical about this. Do not move out of the house permanently, as that could be used against you. Instead, return when she is not there and gather all important documents, financial records, and personal belongings you would not want to lose." I followed her advice precisely. While Natalie was at work the next day, I returned home with a locksmith who changed all the locks. I gathered our financial documents, my personal items, and anything of sentimental value to me. I set up cameras in the common areas of the house, as Sandra suggested for legal protection, and left before Natalie returned. Through the process of gathering evidence for the divorce, I discovered something even more painful. This was not a one-time mistake, as they had tried to claim. Bank statements showed hotel charges in locations where Ryan had supposedly gone for business trips. Text messages recovered from our shared cloud account revealed conversations dating back over a year. They had been carrying on this affair for most of our 5th year of marriage meeting whenever they could create an excuse. The most devastating discovery came from messages where they discussed their future plans. In one exchange from 3 months earlier, Ryan wrote, "When are you going to leave him? We cannot keep sneaking around like this." Natalie's response, "Soon. I just need to figure out the best way to get what I deserve from the divorce. His family has money, and I want to make sure I get my share." This revelation transformed my pain into something colder and more focused. I was not just betrayed, I was a mark, a target they had been planning to exploit. I instructed my attorney to proceed with the divorce as aggressively as possible while remaining within ethical and legal bounds. For nearly a week, I managed to avoid direct contact with anyone from my family. Then my father called, his voice stern and commanding as always. "Fred, this has gone on long enough. We are having a family meeting at our house tomorrow at 6 p.m. Everyone will be there, and we expect you to attend, so we can sort this whole mess out." I started to refuse, but something made me reconsider. "Fine, I will be there." When I arrived at my father's house the next evening, I immediately realized this was not going to be the objective family discussion I had naively hoped for. Everyone was already there: my father and Sandra Ryan, and his wife Jessica, and most shockingly, Natalie. They were all seated in the living room, arranged as if for an intervention. Jessica looked confused and uncomfortable, while the others had expressions ranging from disapproval to outright hostility directed at me. My father stood as I entered, assuming his familiar role as family patriarch. "Fred, we have brought everyone together because this situation has gotten out of hand. What happened between Ryan and Natalie was obviously a terrible mistake, but family is family. We need to find a path forward that does not involve destroying 2 marriages and tearing this family apart." I stared at him in disbelief. "Are you seriously suggesting that I should forgive them and take Natalie back?" "We all make mistakes," Sandra chimed in, not meeting my eyes. "Ryan has sincerely apologized, and Natalie has assured us nothing like this will ever happen again." Ryan then launched into what appeared to be a rehearsed speech, his eyes glistening with practiced tears. "Fred, I cannot express how sorry I am. It was a moment of weakness that should have never happened. Jessica has agreed to work through this with me, and I am begging you to consider doing the same with Natalie. Do not throw away your marriage over one mistake." I looked at Jessica, who seemed small and defeated in her chair, and felt a surge of anger on her behalf as well as my own. Without a word, I pulled out my phone, connected it to my father's television via Bluetooth, and played a slideshow of evidence I had compiled: text messages, hotel receipts, photos they had sent each other, the video from the night I caught them, and finally the messages discussing their plans to eventually divorce me for financial gain. The room fell silent, except for Jessica's audible gasp and subsequent sobbing. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red, but it was not embarrassment. It was rage directed at me. "How dare you bring this filth into my home?" he bellowed, showing these private messages and recordings. This is exactly the kind of vindictive behavior that makes reconciliation impossible. I looked at him with genuine bewilderment. Reconciliation? Are you serious? They have been having an affair for over a year, planning to eventually take me for everything they could get. And I am the vindictive one for exposing it. My father stepped closer, lowering his voice to the intimidating tone he had used throughout my childhood. "You listen to me. Marriages have problems. People make mistakes. But you do not air dirty laundry, and you do not abandon family no matter what. If you go through with this divorce and keep spreading these allegations around, you will regret it." I stood my ground for the first time in my life with him. "Is that a threat?" "It is a promise. You will be cut off. From family events, from any inheritance, from everything. Think very carefully about what you are throwing away here." I looked around the room at the family I had tried so hard to please my entire life. My stepmother avoiding eye contact. Ryan looking simultaneously ashamed and smug. Natalie with tears streaming down her face in a performance worthy of an Oscar. Only Jessica seemed genuine in her distress. "I am sorry, Jessica," I said directly to her. "You deserve to know the truth. As for the rest of you, I will not be emotionally blackmailed into accepting betrayal just to keep up appearances. My attorney will be in touch with all relevant parties." As I turned to leave, my father called after me. "If you walk out that door, you are choosing to tear this family apart. That will be on you, not them." I paused at the door. "No, they made their choices when they betrayed me. You are making yours right now by defending them instead of standing for what is right. Those choices have consequences." I left to the sound of my father's angry shouts. and Jessica's continuing sobs. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for several minutes, shaking with adrenaline, but also feeling an unexpected sense of liberation. For the first time, I had stood up to the toxic family dynamic that had shaped so much of my life. The fallout was swift and extensive. Within days, extended family members I had not spoken to in years were calling and texting, urging me to reconsider. Most had heard a heavily edited version of events that painted me as unreasonably vengeful over a single indiscretion. Some cousins blocked me on social media after I refused to engage with their misguided attempts at intervention. What surprised me most was how few people actually asked for my side of the story. They simply accepted the narrative that Ryan and my father had crafted, in which I was the villain for not being willing to forgive and forget. 3 months into the divorce proceedings, things had only escalated further. Despite the clear infidelity clause in our prenuptial agreement, Natalie was fighting for half of everything we owned together and even portions of my pre-marriage assets. Her attorney was arguing that the prenup should be invalidated on technicalities. Meanwhile, Ryan was facing his own marital crisis, as Jessica had finally found the courage to file for divorce as well. My father made good on his threat. I received official notification from his attorney that I had been removed from his will and trust funds. Family events proceeded without invitation to me. Holidays came and went, with pointed silence from those who had once been central to my life. At family gatherings, I was now the cautionary tale, the unreasonable son who destroyed family harmony over what they continued to minimize as a momentary lapse in judgment. The campaign against me extended beyond family circles. Ryan, whose real estate business operated in many of the same professional spheres as my construction management work, began spreading rumors that I was difficult to work with and emotionally unstable. I lost a potential contract when a client mentioned hearing I was going through some concerning personal issues that might affect my reliability. The isolation might have broken me if not for an unexpected ally. One evening I received a text from Sandra, my stepmother, asking to meet privately at a coffee shop far from their home. Curious and a bit suspicious, I agreed. When we met, Sandra seemed nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder as if afraid of being seen. "Your father does not know I am here." She began, her voice barely above a whisper. But I could not continue watching this happen without saying something. She revealed that Ryan had a history of similar behavior. In college, he had been involved with his roommate's girlfriend, causing a scandal that my father had helped cover up with financial incentives for all involved to keep quiet. There had been other incidents over the years, always with my father stepping in to smooth things over. "Your father has enabled Ryan's behavior his entire life," Sandra admitted. "He sees himself in Ryan too much to ever hold him accountable. When you exposed the affair so irrefutably, it forced everyone to face the truth about Ryan's character and about how Gerald has protected him all these years. That is why they are so determined to make you the villain instead." Her revelation did not exactly surprise me, but hearing it confirmed brought both validation and renewed hurt. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Sandra looked down. "Because watching how they have treated you, how they twisted everything to blame the victim instead of the perpetrators, it has made me question everything about this family and about my own role in it." She slid an envelope across the table. "These are copies of financial records your father has been hiding from me. I think he may be preparing to leave me as well, now that I have started questioning him more." The information Sandra provided proved valuable to my attorney, helping us counter some of the financial maneuvers my father was making to protect Ryan's assets from his divorce with Jessica. It also gave me insight into just how deeply dysfunctional my family system had been all along. After months of enduring their private campaign against me, I decided it was time to set the record straight more publicly. I compiled a digital folder with irrefutable evidence of the affair, its duration, and the subsequent family cover-up attempts. I shared it with key family members who had been fed the distorted narrative, with a simple message: "You have heard one side of this story. Here is the documented truth. Make your judgments." After seeing all the evidence, the response was mixed but significant. Several cousins and my maternal aunt reached out with apologies for their previous assumptions. Some remained loyal to my father and Ryan, but could no longer publicly condemn my actions with the same righteousness. The united front against me began to fracture. Ryan's professional life started suffering as well. Two of his business partners, who had received copies of the evidence from mutual acquaintances, began distancing themselves from him. His carefully cultivated image as a family man with impeccable ethics was crumbling under the weight of the truth. It was around this time that Natalie made her final attempt at reconciliation. She showed up at my apartment unannounced one evening, looking significantly less put together than during her court appearances. When I opened the door, she pushed past me before I could stop her. "Fred, please, we need to talk," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Everything has fallen apart. Ryan and I are over. He blames me for everything going wrong in his divorce. I have lost my job because I could not focus with all this stress. My attorney fees are destroying me financially." I remained standing, not inviting her to sit. "What exactly do you want from me?" "Natalie, I made a terrible mistake," she said, tears flowing freely now. "I got caught up in something exciting and forbidden, but it was never real. What we had was real. I miss our life together. I miss you." I studied her face, searching for any sign of the woman I had once loved enough to marry. All I saw was desperation. "The financial settlement offer from my attorney is fair," I said flatly. "Take it, and we can both move on with our lives. There is nothing else to discuss." "You cannot just throw away 5 years of marriage," she cried. "People make mistakes. Couples recover from affairs all the time. Why are you being so cold?" "It was not a mistake. It was over a year of deliberate choices to betray me with my own brother. And you were planning to leave me anyway. Remember, you just wanted to make sure you got enough money first." I moved to the door and opened it. "Please leave now, or I will call building security." She left, but not before warning me that I would regret my stubbornness when I found myself aging alone while she and potentially even Ryan found happiness with other people. The final family confrontation came unexpectedly at my grandfather's 80th birthday celebration. I had been invited by my grandmother, directly bypassing my father's assumed authority over guest lists. When I arrived, the tension was immediate and palpable. Ryan was there with our father, both looking displeased at my presence. Natalie, now officially my ex-wife, as our divorce had finally been granted the previous week, had not been invited. During dinner, my father, perhaps emboldened by several glasses of expensive whiskey, decided to address what he perceived as the elephant in the room. He stood glass in hand and began what started as a toast to my grandfather, but quickly devolved into a pointed commentary. "Family has always been the cornerstone of the Miller legacy," he announced, looking directly at me. "Through good times and bad, this family has stuck together and worked through its problems. Some of us understand that commitment better than others. Some of us value pride over reconciliation, stubbornness over forgiveness." I remained silent, unwilling to create a scene at my grandfather's celebration. But my grandfather himself, typically a reserved man who avoided conflict, surprised everyone by interrupting. "Enough, Gerald," he said firmly, setting down his fork with a clatter that silenced the table. "I have listened to your version of events for months now. I have also seen the evidence that Fred provided. The only pride and stubbornness I see is in those who refuse to acknowledge wrongdoing and instead blame the person who was betrayed." My father's face flushed dark red. "Dad, you do not understand the whole situation." "I understand perfectly," my grandfather countered. "I understand that my grandson was betrayed by his wife and his brother, and then by his father when he rightly refused to sweep it under the rug. I understand that this family has enabled Ryan's poor behavior for far too long, and I understand that it stops now, at least in my presence." Ryan, who had been sulking silently until that point, suddenly erupted. "This is so typical. Fred has always been everyone's favorite, the perfect grandson who could do no wrong. I made one mistake one time, and everyone acts like I am some kind of monster. One time I finally spoke, my voice steady. We all know it was happening for over a year. We all know about the other incidents in college and beyond. We all know you were planning to continue until Natalie could secure a favorable divorce settlement from me. The evidence was clear. "You always had everything handed to you," Ryan shouted, standing now. "The better education, the more attention, the golden child treatment. Even Jessica always compared me to you. Do you have any idea what that is like living in your shadow?" The raw jealousy and resentment in his voice stunned the table into silence. In that moment, the family mythology of our close, brotherly relationship crumbled, completely revealing the toxic dynamic that had always existed beneath the surface. My grandfather was the first to speak again. "Ryan, that is enough. Whatever resentment you feel toward your brother does not justify your actions. And Gerald, your protection of this behavior stops now. If Fred is no longer welcome at family events that you host, then I will no longer attend them either. The same goes for any family member who chooses sides against the person who was wronged in this situation." The dinner ended shortly after, with various family members breaking into tense, whispered conversations. As I prepared to leave, my grandfather pulled me aside, his hand firm on my shoulder. "You did the right thing standing your ground," he told me. "Some family bonds are not worth preserving at the cost of your self-respect. Remember that." The final divorce decree came through almost exactly 8 months after that fateful night when I discovered the affair. The settlement was far more favorable to me than Natalie had initially demanded, thanks to the prenuptial agreement that ultimately held up in court, and the mountain of evidence regarding her infidelity. She received a cash settlement that my attorney described as generous given the circumstances, but none of the ongoing support or property she had initially sought. Standing on principle had cost me significantly, both financially and emotionally. Legal fees had eaten into my savings. The stress had affected my health with weight loss and occasional insomnia. The family relationships I had worked my entire life to maintain were fractured, potentially beyond repair with some members. Yet despite these losses, I felt an unexpected lightness, as if I had shed a burden I had not even realized I was carrying. Jessica reached out to me after both our divorces were finalized. Over coffee, she thanked me for having the courage to expose the truth when everyone else was pressuring us to accept the betrayal. She had relocated to Minneapolis for a fresh start and seemed genuinely happier despite the upheaval. "I was so afraid of starting over that I almost convinced myself to stay in a marriage that had already been broken beyond repair," she admitted. "Watching you stand firm despite everyone turning against you gave me the strength to do what I knew was right." My relationship with my maternal relatives, with whom I had always been less close due to post-divorce family politics, strengthened considerably. My mother's brother and his wife invited me for weekend visits to their lake house, introducing me to their social circle and providing the family connection I had lost from my father's side. 6 months after the divorce, I accepted a job offer with a development firm in Denver. The position came with a significant promotion, but the real appeal was the opportunity for a fresh start in a place without the weight of painful memories around every corner. I found a modern apartment in a vibrant downtown neighborhood and began establishing new routines. Therapy became an essential part of my healing process. My therapist helped me understand the dysfunctional family dynamics I had normalized throughout my life and how they had affected my relationship choices and self-perception. I reconnected with old college friends who had nothing to do with my marriage or family drama, finding comfort in these uncomplicated relationships. 8 months into my new life in Denver, I received a surprising call from Sandra. She informed me that she had finally left my father and filed for divorce. "Watching how they treated you, how they tried to make you the villain, instead of holding the actual wrongdoers accountable, it opened my eyes," she explained. "I realized I had been accepting similar treatment for decades, just in different forms. Your courage to stand up for yourself, despite the consequences, made me question why I was not doing the same." Perhaps the most unexpected development came when I met Marina during a weekend hiking group excursion. She was a pediatric physical therapist with a warm laugh and direct communication style that I found refreshing after years of navigating family politics and hidden agendas. We started dating casually, with me being completely transparent about my recent divorce and family situation from the beginning. "I appreciate honesty above almost everything else," she told me during one of our early conversations. "The fact that you stood by your principles, even when it would have been easier to look the other way, tells me a lot about your character." As our relationship developed, I found myself able to trust again, though the process was gradual and sometimes challenging. Marina's patience and her own healthy boundaries helped create a relationship built on mutual respect rather than codependency or obligation. A year after my move to Denver, I received a text message from my father. It was brief, but significant. "I owe you an apology. Sandra leaving has made me reevaluate many things. Can we talk?" My response was measured. I did not reject the opportunity for conversation, but I made it clear that any relationship moving forward would look very different from what had existed before. "Some things cannot be undone or unsaid," I wrote, "but I am willing to have a conversation when you are ready to acknowledge the reality of what happened without minimizing or deflecting. Whether that conversation will lead to genuine reconciliation remains to be seen. What I know for certain is that I no longer need his approval or acceptance to validate my worth or my decisions. The painful experience of losing my marriage and much of my family simultaneously taught me that self-respect must sometimes come at the cost of relationships that demand its sacrifice. Looking back on this difficult chapter of my life, I recognize that standing for truth and personal boundaries cost me relationships I had valued. Yet it also revealed which connections were genuine and which were conditional upon me playing an assigned role in the family system. The experience was painful beyond words, but it ultimately freed me to build a life based on authenticity rather than appearance, on mutual respect rather than obligation. Have you ever had to choose between toxic family loyalty and your own self-respect? Share your experience in the comments below. If you found value in my story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences about setting boundaries and rebuilding after betrayal. Remember, sometimes losing people who do not respect you is actually gaining yourself back. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the strength to stand up for yourself when it matters most, even when you stand alone.